Welcome to Grain and Steel. My name's Bray, and today we're going to be making a round end table. So just jumping right into it, I'm using my router and a little router jig I made to cut circles. So I'm going to cut a circle out of this plywood to make the mold. The next step is to apply some flashing tape on the plywood just so I can reuse this mold again. As far as the border for this goes, I'm using just an aluminum flashing, and I'm using screws to secure it on. And a lot of these steps seem kind of quick, but I promise you they are not. That actually took quite a bit of time, and I probably would do it differently the next time. And here I'm now sealing the entire inner edge with a silicone. It's a fast drying silicone, only takes about an hour, so it's much better than using like a caulk or something that takes a full day to cure. So at this point, I'm just kind of waiting for my mold to dry. So while I'm doing that, I'm going to start making my lines and cutting the wood so I know it sits where I want it to be. And for this, I'm just using the jigsaw. I probably could have used the router again, but it's too much to take out, and it's just a whole process. So I just wanted to grab the jigsaw and get it done quickly. So this is what the wood looks like once I've made my cuts. And one thing I didn't mention yet that I think is really important is that you should always make your mold a couple inches bigger than your final table size will be. It just leaves some room for error. So at this point, I'm just clearing out all those cracks and voids and everything. I'm just getting all the soft woods out of there and anything that will prevent the epoxy from bonding correctly. And there's not really a right way to do this. You kind of just use any tool you can to get the job done. And I've used the Dremel, I've used chisels, even like screwdrivers or anything that will get in there and just clean it up nicely. So here I'm just using a mold release spray to make it a lot easier to take the table out once everything's finally cured. So I spray it and then I just use a cheap paintbrush to spread it all over. So this next part's really important. Just make sure you're measuring properly and mixing very well, especially if you're using a dye, which I am in this video. I was actually looking for a jet black look, so I ended up using about 20 drops of dye per liter of epoxy. And so this is the part that most people love. This is the infamous epoxy pour. So I'm just pouring this in all the empty spaces, any of the voids inside the wood itself. And I'm just taking it easy, taking it nice and slow, and just letting it level itself out. And my calculations were slightly off, so I did end up needing to mix up another batch, which was no big deal. Now I just came back with a torch after about 20 minutes to pop all these bubbles and to look for any little floaters or any dust mites that might have been at the surface, so I just picked those out. So after about 4 days, this is what the table should look like. It is fully cured and it's ready to be taken out of the mold. So I'm going to go take it over to the table and I'm going to start prying away. Now I say prying away, but really be a little bit careful here. You do, however, have a little bit of room for error just because we're about to plane it on both sides, which you're going to see in this next clip. So in order to flatten this table, I'm just using this makeshift router sled and I'm just making passes until the entire thing's flat, and then I'm flipping it over and doing it to the other side. And this is what it looks like when it's all done. So the router does leave lines all over your table once you've planed it. So the next step is to use a really low grit sandpaper. I'm just using a 40 grit on my orbital, and I'm just going over those lines over and over until they're all gone. So eventually you're going to be left with a flat surface, and now you're pretty much ready to start cutting the table to size and start routing out the edges and all that good stuff. So in this clip, I'm cutting the table to size. I'm cutting it to 20 inches in diameter. I'm just using the same method that I used to cut the plywood for the mold. I'm just using the router and the spiral bit. I'm just going in a circle with that jig. If you've made it this far in this video, I really appreciate it. Please give it a big thumbs up. It helps out so much. And also subscribe if you're looking for more videos like this. I also know people are really curious on how things like this are made, so if you have any questions at all, leave a comment and I will get to it as soon as I can. So after using the router to cut the circle, I just came back with the jigsaw and made the cut all the way through. And then you just gotta come back with your flush trim bit on your router and your orbital sander to clean up that edge. So now we're really getting into the detailed work, and so what I'm doing right now is I'm coming back with my little baby chisel and I'm chiseling away at those tiny cracks, just opening them up a little bit just so I can fit some CA glue in there and close the crack up for good. And this specific CA glue cures instantly, so that's been a lifesaver. And remember, you're working with wood, so it's super natural for there to be little cracks and voids all over. It took me a whole day just to fill the cracks and voids and then sand the CA glue back down. Now we're just coming back with the round over bit on the router for that nice rounded edge profile. I think it looks really nice, especially on circular tables like this. So I'm going to do this to the top and the bottom. The next thing I'm doing is sanding, and it's probably one of the most important things. It seems like such a simple thing, but you really do have to use the right technique and the right sandpaper, or else you will end up with lines throughout your table and it just won't look very nice. Now the finish I'm using for this table is called Odie's oil, and now the shininess of it completely depends on how high you sand. So I like to sand up to about 320 and it gives me a nice satin finish. So right here I'm just lining up the table base so it sits perfectly in the center of the table. And in this specific case it had to sit about 5¼ inches away from the edge. Now I'm just marking those holes with a pencil so I know exactly where my threaded inserts need to go. So here I'm just using a drill and I'm drilling those holes for the threaded inserts to sit in. And as you can see, I have a piece of tape on the drill bit just so I know how deep I should go. Now you're just going to want to put a quick little dab of wood glue into your holes and start screwing your threaded inserts in there with an Allen wrench. So now for my personal favorite part, the finishing process. We have to clean this table off really well first, and we're going to use some isopropyl alcohol and just a rag I had laying around, and we're going to wipe this table off really, really well. So now we're going to take out our Odie's oil and we're going to open it up and start mixing until it's about the consistency of honey. And we're just going to drizzle it on the table and start working it in with this white pad. And we're going to do this to both sides, and just keep in mind, you don't have to use that much of it. A little bit goes a long way, so just don't use too much. So after about an hour, we're just going to come back and we're going to wipe off all of the excess. And now if you put too much on, then A, you're going to be wasting a lot, and B, it's just going to be a huge pain to wipe it all off. So just don't use too much. So this is what my final finish ended up looking like, and I think it looked incredible. So I was very, very pleased. And also keep in mind, Odie's oil does continue to cure over the course of, they say, about 2 weeks. So it is able to be used, but it still isn't technically completely cured yet. So now that the finish is complete, I am finally going to connect the table base to the table. And so I'm just using these furniture screws and these washers. And I didn't have the washers at first, but I realized that I was going to need them. If you see how close those holes are to the center of the table base, it made it very hard for the screws to end up sitting flush. So I needed to use the washers in order for them to sit properly. So here's the final product in all of its glory. I hope you guys love it as much as I do. If you do like this piece and would like to purchase it, or if you would like a piece custom made, my link to my Etsy is in the description below, so you can go ahead and click that. Also, I really appreciate you guys watching. Please do subscribe if you want to see more videos like this, and I really hope to see you in the next one.